I think AI is transformative across the go-to-market in two ways. I think it's in the ways teams work, which is like more on how you kind of transform the ways teams work, and then also just how you enable your own employees to be much more productive. I think there's a world where it would be hard to even have people on the team and in certain teams that are not AI competent.
Thank you, everyone, for joining this Community Live podcast with the legendary Kieran, who's the SVP of Marketing in Hubspot. And if you don't follow him already, one of the best thinkers I've seen on all things go-to-market and AI. Before we dive into all of the incredible questions from the group and the questions that we had prepared, just quick background for folks that are joining us for the first time. We have this go-to-market community where you all can ask your burning questions to the leading brains and everything go-to-market. So feel free to chime in with questions here, and you can join our community as well in Slack. But quick background for Kieran before hopping into all of the, we're getting in the nitty-gritty of AI here. But he has a proven track record of helping SaaS businesses from startups to enterprise level grow their traffic, users, and revenue. He's a thought leader in growth marketing, and I'd also say everything future of AI and go-to-market. So super excited to have you here today. Maybe we can start off with some background on yourself.
Yeah, I'm a failed developer turned marketer. I've worked in SaaS for a long time. I spent a long time in HubSpot, left HubSpot, went to Zapier, came back to HubSpot. Do a mixture of things here, but the thing I'm really excited by and spend a lot of time on is how to really change the way B2B go-to-markets through AI. So all of the core AI initiatives across all of our go-to-market teams and trying to figure out like where is the upside on AI today and where it's going to be in the future.
And maybe we can start near term next year, longer term, next 3, 5, 10 years?
I think in quarterly increments. So I will say I try not to think more than 3 months in terms of like I guess you can think of it a couple of ways. You can kind of plan for where you think AI is going to be, but obviously the space is moving so fast and things change so rapidly. It is hard to have long-term plans. And I think trying to think in short increments and test and experiment with things and make bets in places where you see signal is the right thing to do. I think there's like some pretty easy use cases that are just well known today, like AI for customer support, AI for inbound sales chat teams, AI for prospecting, AI for content creation. There are some like proven use cases where if you are not doing these things, you're likely already behind the curve. And I think AI, the problem for most people is AI is going to be tough to be in the late movers with AI because it will start to saturate things much, much more rapidly. So if you're in the kind of first mover category, you're going to get much more of the gains. So I think AI is transformative across the go-to-market in two ways. I think it's in the ways teams work, which is like more on how you kind of transform the ways teams work, and then also just how you enable your own employees to be much more productive. I think there's a world where it would be hard to even have people on the team and in certain teams that are not AI competent, right? And because if they are not AI competent, they are likely 10 times less productive than the people who are AI competent. And so I think it transforms the way knowledge workers work. It probably transforms the ways that we even hire knowledge workers in terms of their AI competency. And then it transforms the way that teams work. We can kind of maybe get into some of those examples.
So I like the point of thinking in 3-month or quarter-long increments. It does feel impossible to think that far into the future. It almost feels easier to think 10 years into the future and 3 months. And I find it really hard to think about that in between because people keep underestimating how fast things can move. And so can you talk a little bit about, we talked about, how it impacts teams. Can you talk about AI replacing humans versus AI enabling them? and where you see the differences?
Yeah, I think this is a really tough subject to talk about, really, right? Like, I get it. There's just a lot of change that's going to happen really rapidly. And it's hard to I don't have the answer to where AI is an efficiency gain or a productivity gain. And so I'll give you a really clear example. And what I mean by efficiency is like you can make the business more efficient by doing the same sort of things, but with less humans, or productivity, you can use the gains you get from AI to just create more revenue. And so if you think about AI for, customer support is the most widely known use case today. We've had the likes of Klarna and a lot of other companies talk about the dramatic headcount savings. I think in Klarna's case, it was 700 headcount that they had saved through their support function. For us, we're already plus 100 in terms of like the equivalency of the work that AI does. And so that's a real sizable amount of headcount. I think the question that people have is like, well, do we have other roles for those folks, right? Like there could be support services that you could give because you get the time back from maybe the less complex support or a certain medium of support that AI can actually do. And can you actually delight your customers more by using the productivity gains? You don't just say, well, I'm going to be a more efficient support function. You say, well, actually, we're going to invest in other places in support that only humans can do, but make our customers much more successful, maybe help us get much more expansion deals, whatever it may be. And so I think each company is going to have to decide how it uses the gains from AI. Like the other one is if you have an AI that's able to do a somewhat similar of a job to like a low complex business development rep, but actually is happening in B2C, not really B2B, but there's a lot of B2C companies are starting to use AI, voice-enabled agents, to do like low complex sales. And I was talking to a founder actually over the last couple of days, and they have a technology in the space, and they're saving these companies a lot of headcount, and those companies are deciding to actually accelerate revenue. So it's not that they're getting rid of the headcount, they're actually just deciding to take the headcount savings and accelerate revenue through the same number of humans. And in certain cases, they don't replace the backfills, right? So like they have people going through attrition, and they simply don't replace the backfills. And so it is a tough subject to talk about because it's obviously like if you're in these roles, it's, you're not just a number on a board. Like that's a real job, that's a real person's job. But to me, if you're just going to speak in truths and reality, I just don't see how AI is not incredibly disruptive for a lot of functions and teams that are in B2B today. And it's going to be up to like companies to decide where it takes those productivity gains. And I'll just end with this. We already see it in engineering. If you look at a lot of the stats in engineering and hear some of the things coming out in terms of coders, a lot of companies are not saying, well, now we can save money on coders. It's like, hey, we can now ship way more features. I think it's going to be a pretty interesting time over the next, 2 to 3 years where this stuff really starts to disrupt a lot of teams across traditional B2B companies.
As a buyer of AI, do you more resonate with the value prop of we can help you increase productivity and efficiency, or are you only leaning towards AI that can prove, okay, we can drive you more revenue or accelerate XYZ? How do you think about those two statements?
Yeah. I actually got asked this by a lot of people, both internally and externally. I actually don't care, right? Like I see my job as being able to implement AI and provide the best customer service I can, or the customer experience I can. Like the job of a company is to make customers happy first and foremost. And I just believe that what I'm tasked with is like, how can I incorporate AI to make the customer experience better than it's ever been, which is really what a go-to-market should be. It's just like, how do we elevate the customer experience across all of these different functions? Then it's really, what does the company want to do with those savings, right? Do I want to be a more efficient business? Do I want to like really bring down my CAC and look at, LTV to CAC metric and just look like a better business? Or do I want to accelerate my growth? Like now I have all of these headcount savings. Do I want to actually reinvest those headcounts somewhere else to accelerate growth, or within the same function to accelerate growth? But I believe in like which one of those is AI great at? Like I just go towards what AI is a better customer experience at, or an equivalent customer experience. Like I got to provide an equivalent customer experience that a human can, but obviously it's going to be much more cost efficient. So that's how I think about it, versus like thinking, hey, is it a cost saver or a revenue accelerator?
So to put it very black and white, even though I know it's not as black and white as I'm about to say, if there's different options for ROI and value prop, it would go impact to customers, and then it would be won't care between efficiency and revenue gains.
Yeah, and then whatever way it plays out, Like If there's nowhere to deploy those additional headcounts you get back, then that's an efficiency gain. If there is a way to deploy them and go faster and produce more revenue, then that's a productivity gain. And maybe you're actually redeploying those headcount into other functions, which affects one function, but actually is better for another. I don't know, but I definitely start with like, just where is AI today a really great way to serve the customer and can provide an equivalent experience or even a better experience in some cases.
And do you think this is something that other companies are approaching as well, or do you think this is unique to you and HubSpot?
I think AI in a lot of cases for a lot of companies, it depends on like what your goal is as a company and where you are in terms of your want to grow revenue. There is like a whole, like because we live in our tech high growth company bubble. There's a whole industry of companies that are a certain size and they're happy being a certain size. IPO, they're not trying to get this giant exit, like just good companies. And for the most part, I think AI is going to be a huge efficiency gain for them. I think they're going to look at it and probably think, hey, how can I get be the same business that I am today with half of the people in the business? Because that actually saves me a ton of money. It makes my business much more cost efficient and generates me a ton more revenue. There's all of these, like, I find it really hard to predict what's going to happen. Like, you can even look at the tech space, and for the most part, the tech space has been successful because of venture capital. And what actually happens when you have smaller business in terms of employee, you can have all these small businesses that are very cost efficient and really effective because of AI and never need the size of capital investments that venture has done traditionally. And that completely changes the way tech works and what you invest in and what the size of companies could be and what a successful company is. So there's all these like second orders of like impact that could happen. But do I believe AI is going to disrupt headcount for the majority of businesses? Yes. Like I haven't seen anything to suggest that is not going to be true.
It's a good reminder that a lot of us are in an echo chamber on LinkedIn of VC-backed tech companies where everything you talk about is AI, and their experimental budget just for AI. That doesn't exist in most of the world.
Exactly. Like I was at a very large conference. You were at it as well, Inbound, recently. I did 8 talks in AI. And I was in my and I was talking about all of these different things that I like to build. And I walked around the floor and I started asking companies, because there's a wide range of companies that event, and they're all great companies, but there's, these kind of smaller companies and they're just trying to have a great business. And again, they're, fit into that category where they're not trying to take venture capital money, they're not trying to IPO, they're not trying to exit. And I would be like, hey, what are your thoughts on agents and which ways are you using AI? And they're like, I don't even know what you're talking about. Like, they've heard of AI, but they don't know where to start, right? Like, they're still, how do I use ChatGPT and Claude effectively in my own day-to-day work? And so we still are in the early stage, but I still believe that the early stages are still going to be very disruptive. And you see that in search, right? I already know that, like, on average, sites are starting to lose traffic because AI assistants are starting to cannibalize traditional search. Google, we see it in email. Email is starting to become saturated because you have all of these AI tools are able to automate a lot of prospecting and outreach. I'm sure everyone in your community is getting more cold emails than ever before. And so I believe the AI's ability to saturate things, because it can bring all of these people who are not great at something to like pretty good at something very rapidly, and you're all competing in the same spaces. I think AI is going to have a pretty accelerated impact on like how we do business, how we go to market.
It's so interesting to hear the reminder of the rest of the world. I would say we're in the phase of early adopters jumping on AI, getting excited, usually tech industry, usually VC backed, the high growth. When do you think it becomes, and I know we can't predict the future and your answer can be, I don't know, but when do you think this becomes the norm to the other companies that are not in this bubble, such as, you think about the internet, it eventually became the norm after the early adopters.
This isn't self-serving, but I think the more existing platforms like HubSpot and others just integrate AI into how things are done, that actually just makes it easier for companies to use. I think most companies in that middle bucket, like not the early adopters, will use AI without saying, I'm using AI. It's just going to be incorporated into their day-to-day tools, into their day-to-day work processes. If you actually, think think about where do the large companies want to go? Google, OpenAI, Claude, these large AI assistants are all vying to be the number one personal assistant, right? That's what they want to do. Apple obviously have a little bit of stake in there because they've tried to start to incorporate that into the phone. OpenAI obviously have the partnership with Apple as well, but I don't know so the personal assistant, I think, is the most interesting thing to think about. What these companies would like to do is give you a personal assistant. So personal assistant can basically use the internet for you, and they will have a B2C version of that and the B2B. Like the B2B will be a knowledge worker. If you actually looked at if you've kind of listened to what Sam has said and seen some of the things that he has spoke about, it would be the equivalent of having a knowledge worker for you go and use all of these tools. And the same way you see, that's how they have disrupted Google, because you don't have to go click through the blue links. You have an assistant that can actually go and do that for you and clearly and concisely give you something back. So I think the biggest thing that will be disruptive and will get AI into more people's hands is when you have an assistant that can actually just do a bunch of things for you. And it's as easy as you and me having a conversation, and that assistant gets integrated into hardware. Like it's in your phone, it's on your laptop, which is why OpenAI released a Mac app, because they get closer to the hardware, closer to the data, and they can actually start to capture things you're doing day to day on a laptop, so they can provide a much better personal assistant. So there's some of these things that haven't come online yet, I think, in the way that they will, that I think will be huge adoption explosions for how people use and start to become much more familiar with AI.
So would you say, one of the questions I wanted to ask is, what are the most successful AI go-to-market companies going to be in the future? But what I just heard from you is you're not even going to know it's AI. It's just solving a problem that's big, driven by AI. Is that fair?
Yeah. I think it's just going to be integrated into the tools that we have and the things that we do. And I think we'll have this personal assistant that can actually, I can basically say to it, hey, like, go build me a list of CMOs in the US that have a high lead score, craft a sequence, make that sequence audio, text, and video, and add some personalized video. Like I'll be able to do that, and it will be able to actually go do that for me and then bring me back the results. Now there's a whole other conversation to have of like what even happens to software if you don't use the software, and all the software is a back end for the agent to use, and that's a whole other hard thing to wrap your head around, because that's really how Google is being displaced, right? We're moving the blue links into the background, and now we have a natural language interface, this AI assistant that just uses the blue links to go get the content for me. And what happens when that happens to software? But I think AI will have mass adoption when people don't call it AI. Like it's just like how we interact with the internet.
Yeah, it's like how years ago there used to be VC funds that were focused on internet funds, and now there are AI funds. It'll just become every company has both of these things.
Yeah, it's the same with SaaS and these things. They just become ubiquitous.
Yep. So how do you feel? And I'm curious if the question I ask, if you have a different reaction based on selling HubSpot to customers versus you being a buyer of technology. How do you think about AI experimental budget? Because I've seen so many companies, they've budget allocated towards just experimenting with AI, and I hear very mixed feelings from folks that are selling products and it coming from that budget.
If you have go-to-market teams and they don't think AI is part of their job, then I would be pretty nervous, right? That's my litmus test, right? If you're in these functions and you don't think AI is a core part of how your team should operate, then you're very far behind the curve, right? If you're in sales and you really are not thinking about how does AI enable and transform the way that we sell, then you just are so oblivious to what's going on, right? There are so many incredible tools in that space that can help sales teams be so much, much better. Same in customer success, same in marketing, same in support. And so there's like this kind of, I think it's like, I didn't go through the offline to online stage, the internet stage, but I do wonder if businesses looked around and said, like, do we have the right people to make this transition? Mm-hmm. Which is like, do we have people who understand how transformational this technology is? Are they deeply curious about it? And then they started to integrate it into their day-to-day work. It's like a reset, right? It's a reset of like the skill sets that will actually thrive as AI becomes more fundamental to how we go to market, as AI becomes more fundamental to the way the businesses work. And I think if you have teams that are just trying to, and it is going to happen for a variety of reasons, but if you have teams that are just like, I don't want to know about this AI thing, it's too overwhelming, then you're in trouble, right? I think that is like one of the things you can think about as you go forward. And you can encourage it in your teams. You can have like hackathons. You can make sure they have seats to these AI tools. You can have different ways to incorporate it. But wow, you have to have a team that understand the importance of it. And then there's this other really hard problem that B2B companies have to solve, which is the way you train these AI assistants and models to be better to serve your go-to-market teams is you actually need the teams to work with the models to continue to train them and show them what good is and show them how to do the job and show them how to like be successful. And in some ways that's a tough thing because is that person training the AI model to do their job? Like that's a hard thing to have someone do. I empathize with people who are like, well, why would I do this if you're saying that this is going to get better over time and can do the thing I do? And that's why I think as a companies, you kind of have to have, well, yeah, it's going to be able to do these things, but we're going to reinvest our time here, right? You have to have a narrative to say like, well, where does that time that we save you, where does that get put back and how can we reskill you to do those things?
What skills are you looking for in future sales and marketing hires, maybe beyond just literate in AI? And does that change with AI?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know if we're at the point where you would say, like, I think the question is, do you incorporate AI into the interview process? Mm-hmm. I do think there's a lot of nuance to that because there are these, because again, I want to make sure I'm not in my tech echo chamber, and I'm someone who spends nearly every day in AI. So I'm like very I try not to be so insulated. And so I would say, yes, right? Like you would want to incorporate AI into your interview process. You would want to you should always try to hire people who are deeply curious, proactive, and could go do stuff without being told to do stuff. And like, that's just good characteristics. And those people will be more successful with AI than anyone else. There are these industries that I don't know today, is it so important? There's probably a ton of industries that they're not early adopters, and you don't need to be an early adopter to be successful in those industries. And maybe you would be a little bit more forgiven for people who are not deeply curious about AI, who are not AI literate. But I do think I do think we're at a point where you would want to start to really consider that as part of the interview process, as part of the interview questions. And I have talked to people recently in interview processes, and when they haven't thought clearly about how AI is disruptive for their role, and I can reel off, even if it's not a role that I've done or have done or I'm even close to, and I can name 3 things straight away that AI would be useful for in their role, and they haven't thought about that, then that is a blocker for me moving ahead with those people.
So less so different skill sets, because curiosity is always important. Less so, maybe there's some sort of component of incorporating AI into the interview process, but what's most important is making sure folks are forward thinking and understanding where AI is going to fit into their job so that they can jump on it right when they start.
Yeah. Like, have they played with the technology? Have they thought about how it can actually help them in their role? Have they done anything in their personal time with AI? Like any kind of cool initiatives? We're still at the stage where you don't need a formal portfolio of work that you've done, but I think that you'd want to have ideas and have played with it, right? You'd want to have done something with it and started to think about, well, how can I use this in my day-to-day?
So let's say you have a team or company of all curious, forward-thinking, AI-savvy people. I still see a lot of companies, including the one I just explained, struggling to test and roll out AI because it's so new. So everything from evaluating to onboarding to enabling and adopting. You've had a good framework for this at HubSpot, which I'd love to hear more about.
Yeah, I think you need to have top-down company goals, and then you need to provide the environment where employees can use it in their day-to-day work, right? Which is the kind of do and deliberate phase. So AI was in the do phase, which is when ChatGPT came out in November 2022. The following year, most companies just said, let's do AI. And then everyone kind of was doing, all teams were doing stuff and people were trying to do stuff, but there wasn't like a clear and concise way that companies would figure out, is this stuff even impactful, or what is anyone even actually doing? So I think you have to move into this kind of do and deliberate phase where where in your company do you want to make some real investments? Like, where do you think AI, and this does take some knowledge about AI, which is, when I look at my business, there's a couple of things that I believe AI will be transformational for, and I'll just create top-down goals, stand up a little team, and go after those and drive accountability. So we'll have core KPIs. We'll look at it each and every week. At the end of the month, we'll say, are we on track, not on track? Have we got the right people, not the right people? that's the deliberate phase where I think each company now should actually have some sort of core goals and measurables for the AI work they're doing, so you can see if this stuff is actually providing an impact for your business. On the do stage, that is like the curiosity part. How do you enable the people in your teams to actually start to integrate this in their day-to-day work? Because you believe if your employees do that, they're going to be much more productive than all of the other companies where the employees are not doing that. And I think that's what I saw in Zapier. I've seen it in HubSpot. It's like these internal hackathons are really good, where you have all of these teams collaborate and get together and do some cool stuff. You have to provide the right tooling, provide the right, seats of these AI assistants, things like that, where they can actually do some things. And so I think you want to be really deliberate about some of the investments you want to make and track, and then you want to provide an environment where people can start to figure out how to integrate it into their day-to-day work.
It's important to also figure out what I say a tool versus a toy. There's a lot of AI out there that's still trying to find the problem to solve versus AI first, where you're, finding the problem to solve and then building the solution.
Yeah.
So have you come across that at all?
Yeah, well, this is the deliberate. Like, you want to start with where do you believe AI will actually be beneficial, right? We can default to, hey, I believe AI is going to be really great for my customer support. I believe AI is going to be really great for our procurement process. That's actually one place that I've seen a lot of great tools and innovation happen. We believe AI is going to be really great for our research team. And these are the reasons we believe that, because we know something about AI, and these are the ways that we are going to measure it. These are the lead indicators that it actually matters. You have to, I see companies run AI a lot of times like an IT project, and it needs to be run like a growth agile project. And I think if you run it like an IT project, it's not going to be successful.
That is the extremely good point that I have not heard yet. There are a lot of large organizations where IT is initiating the work. And so it's kind of taking a solution and pushing it across the business functions versus the other way. That's incredibly thoughtful. Well, Kieran, thank you so much for being here. For folks who kind of want to learn more about these topics, we have the 10X community, which is helping you become the AI forward sales and marketer that Kieran explained. But thank you. This was incredible. You truly are one of the best AI thinkers that I have met. Where can folks find you if they want to learn more about what you're talking about?
Yeah, I'm on the Marketing Against Grain podcast. That's really the best place. We talk a lot about AI, and I'm always on LinkedIn, getting trolled by people, but come troll me on LinkedIn. It's good fun.
I'm excited to look back on this podcast in 5 years and see.
Yeah, I know. God, we might actually have the hoverboards by then. It actually really happened. Yeah.
It'll actually be both of our avatars speaking to
each other. Yeah, hoverboards. Cool.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.